BTW. Ring the bell. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. Today I have an interesting tale to share. It wasn't what I wanted to discuss when I went on location this past weekend. If you've been listening to my podcast, you know the first few weeks in my current role weren't the best. I had a challenging time and a difficult leader. But what I didn't know what was coming next. This weekend was special to me for a lot of reasons, which I'll go into in the next clip. I'd like to thank my family and my friends and the Multifamily Media Network for allowing me to share this tale. There's no intro, there's no outro, and there's no sponsorship. This is just me, raw, in my happy place.
This is a special anniversary for me, and I don't think this is what I was going to talk about when I originally decided to come down here this morning to record this. Yesterday was my work anniversary, September 21st. But September 22nd is the anniversary of me being cancer-free. I had only been with one company about 6 months, 5 months actually, and I wasn't having the best work experience in my first 5 months. I didn't have, at the time, I didn't have some of the best training. I didn't have some of the best leadership. And after a few months into the job, I started to have swollen glands. I wasn't feeling well. And unfortunately, at that time, I didn't have health insurance. I was also a proud male who just said, you know what, it's just a little cold, just a couple of swollen glands. I'm sure I'll get better. By January of 2016, I wasn't getting any better, and my health insurance kicked in. And the first thing I did as soon as I had health insurance was went and saw my doctor. That first doctor visit, she said to me, listen, it's just probably a swollen lymph node. Go see a specialist and have it drained. As you can already tell, that wasn't the case. I went to go see my doctor and immediately was referred to an ear, nose, and throat specialist to, get my lymph nodes drained. Very quickly, my ear, nose, and throat specialist said, yeah, I don't think this is swollen lymph nodes. And after a barrage of testing, blood work, CAT scans, even a spinal tap, everything came back. I was diagnosed with stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma, bulky. I was riddled with cancer in my upper lymphatic system. It was a shock, as you can imagine. Nobody likes to get a cancer diagnosis. Nobody likes to get any diagnosis, to be perfectly honest, but the big C definitely hit me hard. The first 2 months, I didn't tell anybody other than my immediate family. January and February were an absolute blur. I had only been on the job a few months. I was worried about my career. I was worried about whether or not I was going to be able to work, how long I was going to be able to work, and the importance of that to me, my livelihood, and my family. At the time, we were a single-income household, and me not being able to work, even for a short period of time, could have been absolutely catastrophic. So The next hardest thing I had to deal with after I was diagnosed with cancer was telling my company. So I showed up to work. It was early March, just a couple of days after I had received my diagnosis. I showed up early that morning, as I always do, and was ready to tell my VP at the time and have a conversation about what was going on and talk through the next steps. But something weird happened that early morning. Um, my VP at the time was an early bird like me, and he wasn't there that morning. So I went and got my cup of coffee with a black cloud hanging over me. I had been preparing all weekend for what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. I remember it like, I remember the story details like it was yesterday, even though it was 8.5 years ago. Shortly in the late morning, three vice presidents from Wynn had taken the train down and walked in the New York office. One of them I had previously met, the other two I didn't know. By early afternoon, we were all sitting in the conference room, and they were letting us know that our vice president had resigned effective immediately, and these three leaders were taking over the New York City operations effective immediately. Well, that was an interesting way to start the day. It wasn't how I expected the day to go. It wasn't on my list of things that I needed to discuss and talk about today. See, like I said earlier, sometimes your day doesn't go as planned. This was definitely one of those days that didn't go as planned. By the end of the day, those three vice presidents from Wynn were bringing us into a conference room one by one. And they wanted to assure all of us that all of our jobs were safe, that everything was going to go fine, that nothing was going to change. And they just wanted to get to know each of us, hear our stories, find out what we needed. So I went into this conference room with, I smile as I think of it. It had old style 1970s wood paneling on the wall and a green shag carpet on the floor. That was our conference room in our small New York City storefront in Harlem, New York. Those three VPs sat at the table, and I sat at the front of the room, and they asked me what I did. And I said, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Chris Caramonica. I'm the capital projects manager for Wynn. And the executive vice president, who I actually had known, looked at me and said, that's not a title at Wynn. I think we'll make you the director of maintenance. Or after one additional title change, that's been my title ever since. Director of facilities, director of maintenance. Wow, I not expected to get a job change, title change, promotion, whatever you want to call it. I thought of it as a promotion at the time. And in retrospect, it was. I was a capital projects manager just overseeing capital projects for our clients in New York City. And now I was the director of maintenance overseeing the maintenance operations for our New York City portfolio. There was a lot more to it than just dealing with capital projects. The next part of the conversation went in slow motion for me. They asked me if there was anything that I wanted to share with them or anything that they needed to know as they were taking over the portfolio. I blurted out, I have cancer. The room went silent. For me, it sounded like 5 minutes of silence, but in reality, it was probably only 30 or 45 seconds. Then the senior vice president in the room turned and looked at me and said, what do you need? I proceeded to tell all three of these gentlemen about my cancer diagnosis, the entire process that I just laid out for you, how I got sick, when I got sick, all the testing that I had gone through, the blood work, spinal tap. They looked at me and said, "What do you need?" And I said that I'd be going into chemo treatments for the next 7 months. I would be out of the office every other Thursday, or I would be getting my chemo treatments and possibly radiation after that. To me again. He said, "Chris, what do you need?" I didn't know. That wasn't what I had planned for the day. This wasn't a conversation I wanted to have then, and it wasn't the onus for this podcast today. Sometimes I just don't know what I need. So I blurted out again. I need 2 computer monitors and a laptop dock for my house. So on the days that I'm not feeling well enough to commute into the office, or days that I just wasn't feeling well, I'd like to be able to work from home. Yeah, I wanted to work from home even before it was even in fashion. And he looked at me and he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, tell us what you need, and we'll be here for you, and we got you." So we finished that conversation, and I had a gigantic weight lifted off my chest, if not literally because of the Hodgkin's lymphoma, definitely figuratively. I experienced something for the first time in my time at Wynn. I experienced leaders that actually were compassionate, that were listening, that were caring. Up until that point, I wasn't having a great experience. I mentioned in the previous podcast, my first week, I spent an entire week in a cube. I had a vice president who really didn't know what to do with me, didn't really ask much of me. To put it bluntly, didn't give me the time of day. That's how I felt. That was the reality of my situation. But the one thing I didn't tell you was the day after that conversation with those 3 gentlemen, I came into the office and it was a great day. I had a new job. I had new bosses. Oddly enough, I had a new lease on life. So I went home that night. As I walked into my house, there were 3 boxes on the porch, 2 laptop monitors, and a laptop dock. I can only imagine that senior vice president calling or texting somebody the minute I walk out of the room, getting me those things that I needed, thought I needed, overnighted to me. That meant a lot. It still means a lot. Now it's time for truth. I worked every single day for 6 months. Every other Thursday, I would arrive at my oncologist's office for my chemo treatments. I would set up in a chair where I would get hooked up to various cancer-killing drugs that would hopefully solve my problem. Every other Thursday, I would walk in with my backpack on, full of everything I needed to work for that day. And for 7 hours, I would open up my laptop, I put in my earphones, and I would sit and I would work. I'd spend all week planning what I'd be doing for those 7 hours, whether it was reviewing work orders or putting together capital budgets, whether it was sending off emails or playing catch up on emails because I spent so much time out in the field, even during my treatments. But I always went into those days with a plan. And I was successfully working 6.5 to 7 hours a day right there for my chemo. I only missed 2.5 days in 6.5 months, and that's not to brag. I needed to work. I wanted to work. Yes, still a single income household. But for me, work is what I was able to focus on, is what I was able to was one of the many ways I was able to get through. Yes, family, friends were a huge part of that time in my life and my journey, but I think the work is what really helped get me through. It got to a point, I would say probably about a month in, month and a half in, my wife begged my oncology nurses to tell me to stop working, that I should just sit there and relax, listen to some music, watch some TV. And my oncology nurses very sweetly looked at my wife and said, honey, if he can work, let him work. So that kind of squashed the stopping of the workload. So I did. I worked every other Thursday from my oncology department where I was getting my treatments. We made some interesting friends. My nurses were fantastic. I learned a lot about a lot of different things at that time. During those 6 months, I learned a lot about myself as a person, but I learned a lot about being a better leader. See, one of the hardest things for me was I was used to being on site. I was used to managing people face to face. And in this environment, I wasn't able to. During my chemo treatments, I wasn't able out to do as many site visits as I would have liked. I had to wear masks almost every single day I was in the office or I was out in the field. Yes, I was wearing masks long before COVID and long before it was in fashion. I guess the work from home and the masking maybe made me a trendsetter, and it definitely helped me get through COVID. Just a few short years later. So I successfully completed my chemo treatments. 9 months ago, I rang the bell and finished my chemo. So September 22nd. I came out cancer-free and a completely different person, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually, but definitely as a leader. I now really focus on what my team needs. I focus on what they need at their work lives, what do they need in their personal lives. I listen to their stories. I try not to start every day with what's next. I try to not start every day with the list anymore. I try to think about what do my team members need, what do my residents need, what's going on in their personal lives, and how can I help them strike that work-life balance. I learned a lot, and these are just some of the many lessons that I learned during those 6 months. Those leaders that I met with on that day where I blurted out, I have cancer, showed me how to lead. They showed me how to care about people. They also checked in with me almost every single day in those 6 months, whether it was a phone call, a text, an email. They asked me how I was doing, how was my family, and they were always asking me what did I need. One of those leaders I'm proud to say I still work with and I still work for. He's one of my closest and dearest confidants. I will never forget that day that I first met him for a multitude of reasons as long as I live. I didn't have a great first experience my first few months with wind companies, but every subsequent day since that first day where I blurted out I have cancer, I have been in it. I have been all in. Because of the caring, compassionate nature my leaders treated me on that first day that they met me and every subsequent day since. A few months after I finished my chemo treatments, we had our annual event with one that we do every year where we bring in people from all over the company, from all levels in the organization to a new event we call Winter Circle. And at that Winter Circle, I was surprised to be honored with the Maintenance Leadership Award. I still have it on my desk and I will keep it forever. But that was the organization recognizing me not for my cancer, not for my survival, but they were recognizing me for my leadership. And that's what I try to do every day. I try to be a strong leader. I try to be a good leader. Well, notice I said I try. I think we all try. I think the early bird catches the worm, and every day I'm trying to catch that worm. Every day I wake up saying, what kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? Or I like to say I'm perfect. I'm not. But I know that in the darkest of times, in the hardest situation that we see, the hardest situations that we see, I know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I can come out on the other side and I can bring and lead my teams to come out on the other side. I'm pleased to report I have been cancer-free since I rang the bell. One of the other things that I also took away from that time of isolation, of being in a mask and being in chemo treatments, was to give back. Give back to my family, give back to my friends, be there for them. Give back to my industry. It took me a couple of years to get the ball rolling, but I've talked about my volunteerism before, so I'm not going to rehash it, but everything that I have done over the last 9 years has really stemmed from those 6 months, which was one of the darkest times in my life. And in closing, I want to thank the amazing team members that I've had the honor and privilege of working with at Win Companies. One, for their leadership and their guidance and their support. And two, for being really great people. I also want to thank my family. I think about them a lot this time of year, especially on this day. My in-laws were here for me every step of the way. My parents, my brother, my brother-in-law have been there for me every step of the way. My wife and daughter were my rock. I did it all for them. I do it all for them. But for those 6 months, they did it all for me. Our personal stories matter. Our personal journeys matter, which is why I wanted to share mine with you today on this slightly overcast day, the first day of fall, last day of summer, here in my happy place, the beach in New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. I thank you so much for listening in. I thank you so much for everything that you do. And someday I want to hear your tales. Please share your tales. Our tales, our stories matter. People can learn and grow and be better people for them. And that's all I want to do, is I want to share my tales and share yours. So I have been rambling on for a while now. This is not how I thought today's podcast was going to go. I'll be honest, I don't even know if I'm going to ever hit send on this and share it with you all. If you're listening, I got the courage to hit send. I got the courage to post this. Thank you for joining me today for Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance.